Let's talk about the comments that Mike Norvell made to his Florida State football team.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. This is a second edition of Locked On Seminoles today, and there's going to be a lot more of these, so be sure to check it out. Today's show is going to be very straight to the point. It's going to be about 10 minutes, and we're going to get out of here. And it's really about the following. Mike Norvell had some comments to his team after the game, and I'm curious as to the fans what they think about responsibility, what we have to do, how you carry yourself after a poor performance. Now, let me give a little backdrop. Based on being around football most of my life in some way, shape, or form, I've heard a lot of really nasty conversations after games when teams played bad. I've heard really positive ones, and then I've seen some of the ones in the middle ground. Norvell, in this case, took a little of both. But first, he also took responsibility. I want to give you a quote. I don't want to misquote it, so I wrote it down, that I think everybody should take into account. Again, Norvell is not happy with how they played or anything, but take this into account. Everybody knows that we are better than what we put on the field, so that's my fault. Taking responsibility will not only make the fans happy, the boosters, the president of Florida State University, on and on, it will give credibility to Mike Norvell amongst his coaching staff, trainers, the athletic department, and of course, the football players themselves. Everybody's culpable. They play poorly. But at the end of the day, he's the one with the massive check coming in every month. He's the one that is the leader of the program. He's the one at the head of all the press conferences. Mike Norvell took responsibility. I was curious to see what he said, if he would just come out and say that. So for me, that's a big checkbox. Some coaches won't do it. I'm sure that at least a handful of you watching this pod are thinking about, oh yeah, I remember when so-and-so threw his team under the bus. Well, I've been around that too. Awkward. Don't be that person. It generally does not serve you well. Even if the players were the ones that were mostly culpable. And, I wasn't at the practices or in the game plan meetings, so I don't know, but it's not going to serve you well to make that statement. So good for Norvell. Something else that I think is interesting, based on listening to a few things that I heard from what he said, it was pretty animated. He was disappointed in the effort. Talking about carrying a standard, that's something he discussed quite a bit going into fall camp, during fall camp, with the media. Very giddy. I remember talking about it last week. Norvell was excited. You remember the little thing that he did with Florida State's media at a restaurant there in Tallahassee? Pretty happy guy. Everything that I saw, everything that I read, all my experience told me they're in a good spot here. Boy, was I wrong. So that's the other reason I find it interesting that he was taking all their heat right there, the mea culpa. He could have went the other way. Now, if you watched any of my podcasts in the last 72 hours, you know that since Saturday's game, I've made no bones about it, especially the lack of physicality and all of that. I don't have any details on what Coach Norvell and his staff have said about that. I do not have any details on what the practice plan will be. I'd love to, but I do not. But I'm curious about the next time that he speaks, because something I'll bring up Bill O'Brien here in a second, the head coach for the Eagles, because while Thomas Castellanos, and that was the first pod today that I talked a lot about him, is a priority to slow down, they have to work on Florida State. So him taking responsibility hopefully will help the players themselves take responsibility to get better. They've got nowhere to go but up. Everybody in the world, myself included, is pointing at them like, what are you guys doing? This is a chance for Florida State's football team to get up off the mat and show that they can be a quality football team in 2024. I have no idea what to expect out of their record. I posted on Locked On Seminoles X handle possibilities for 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, and 11-1. Around 60% of the people picked 8-4. It's just a teeny bit over. I mean, that's 3 out of 5. I didn't expect that to be that number. Now, I'm sure fans from Florida and Miami helped intervene there. But even if it was 40% Florida State fans thought that, that's not very optimistic. So Norvell and his team, I'm curious what kind of feedback they're getting, because I imagine they're getting hammered on pretty good. But when we come back, I'm going to talk about Bill O'Brien's comment about Thomas Castellanos. And I did some research on the Boston College offensive line, because I think they're going to be pretty good. Florida State's defensive line needs to figure it out. Like right now, linebackers, safeties, everybody, because BC is going to come downhill. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. Florida State fans, want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do, Ultimate College Football Head Coach. This amazing game is a simulation where you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles? Recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, and overseeing training camps and handling scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle all the pressure? And here's what's really cool about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. The way you win or lose is in your hands. Your strategy will only determine the success or failure of your team, but it will also shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is free, no ads, and 100% playable. Even if you're offline, you can play as you see fit on the go. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Seminoles fans. Use the promotion code LOCKEDONCFB, all in caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. Download the game just by going to ultimate-cfb.com. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Download it today. Boston College head coach Bill O'Brien had his press conference today. I watched just a little bit. I was looking for one thing, and I was really hoping that I'd get it early in the podcast so I could get in and out, and I was blessed. Somebody asked him second or I think the third question. Bill was a pro-style coach, and for those you don't know, he was coordinator when they had Tom Brady at New England for quite a while. Took the Penn State job when they had all the problems. Ended up being at Houston. Was going to be the coordinator at Ohio State, then he got the BC job. So he's been around, but one thing is clear about him. He is a pro-style, pocket passing quarterback coach, period. There is no doubt about it. He's considered a quarterback guy. Like Tom Brady would help make you that way. I get it. But even after he didn't have Tom behind him in practice, getting ready to come up to the line when he's talking to people, look, he's always had a pocket guy. That's his style. That's what he wants. He had a guy with a little bit of mobility. It's not that he took it away, but he still wanted his guys in the pocket. So my question was simple. Thomas Castellanos, over 1,100 yards rushing last year. Thomas Castellanos, the same guy that had 16 carries, 95 yards rushing, and one score against your Florida State Seminoles last year up in Boston. That young man looks like he's going to get his shot. If you go by Tom's commentary, I'm just going to read the quote. You make your own decision on what this means. I have a different opinion on it, and I'm going to give my take after I talk about not only his quote, but the offensive line. We're going to discuss a couple of things with this. But here's the quote from Bill O'Brien, Boston College's head coach. We're going to let Tommy be Tommy. Now, to me, that's pretty straightforward. Because somebody asked him about how's he going to fit into the offense and everything. It was a softball toss way of saying, are you going to make this kid try to be a pocket quarterback? Because he's not. You could tell what the reporter was trying to say to Bill O'Brien. Bill was in good spirits. He can be a real chippy guy. He's not the most popular person amongst some of the media members I know. Matter of fact, one of them absolutely can't stand the guy. But he was pretty cool with it. And he said, yeah, we're just going to let Tommy be Tommy. To me, that means you let him run 15 times against Florida State, maybe more. Do note I brought up 15 because that's the exact number that Haynes King ran against the Florida State Seminoles this past Saturday. Obviously, he had success. Thomas is a more gifted athlete. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, I've seen him play live. I have not seen Haynes play live, but Thomas could play running back. He was recruited literally to Florida State to be an opportunity in the backfield. He didn't want him a quarterback. He passed. Clemson, same deal. Didn't want to give him a shot at quarterback. He passed. Went to UCF. Then he has transferred to BC last year. Was his first season with the Eagles. Is he a great quarterback in the truest sense? No, he is not. But that doesn't mean you cannot mix and match. For whatever it's worth, and I'm paraphrasing here, this isn't an exact quote, but Bill brought up how Thomas is a guy that he's learning a lot and he's gotten a lot better. And Bill is a pretty blunt guy, like beyond blunt. He's kind of like me. Like, he doesn't really care. He's going to let it rip. So I thought that was interesting. But that brings up the following point. If Bill is true to this, will he use him the best way or just kind of? And this is why I bring it up, because I did some research on their offensive line, who I think is going to start, and looking at a BC side and kind of researching. I'm just going to go through the list with their starts, their sizes, based on what I know. The most likely NFL guy is probably Drew Kendall. I assume that's out of the Kendall family that's got history at BC. 6'4", 300. He's a center. Started 13 games last year. Played well over 700, if not 800 snaps. He's got a future. That's a big-time player. The center for Georgia Tech ate Florida State alive last week. Kendall's that good. Florida State needs to be ready. Logan Taylor, the left tackle, big old dude, 6'7", 308. He also started 13 games, started all of those and over 700 snaps. Power football is what they're known for. That's probably not going to change because they're not going to just completely out-athlete the Noles. Right tackle, Ozzie Trapillo, 6'8", 309 pounds. He didn't start 13, but he did start 12. You getting the theme here? This is a team that at both tackles and at center, their three most important positions on the line, have returners. Left guard, Jack Conley. This is an interesting deal. BC had more linemen than they did tight ends, apparently, because check this out. 6'7", 325. He had 5 starts, but 3 of them were at tight end. Then he had 1 at right tackle, 1 at left guard. They went just power football part of the year. I know they weren't deep at receiver, but that, putting a 320-pound man in at tight end, that's going all in on the run game. But he was a good teammate and played 3 spots, so good for Jack Conley. Finally, right guard may or may not be this guy. They're not sure. Dwayne Alex, 6'2", 309 pounds. He didn't start any games last year, but he played a little less than 20 snaps in a couple. We'll see how right guard goes. Now, with that much experience, you would assume that BC is going to run the ball and be effective. I don't know how well they pass protect. So this is the caveat to my original point about O'Brien and letting Thomas be Thomas. Quarterback runs, bootlegs, sweeps, buck sweeps where you fake, like it looks like it's going this way and it's just a naked to the quarterback, try to draw the defensive end in. Not many DNs are going to handle Thomas. I could see him running some of those plays if they're smart. But that's not the stuff that Bill traditionally runs. How much will he do that versus Florida State? Sometimes less is more. And I'm not saying Bill's not a smart guy because that's false. I'm just saying right now, installing the offense, they don't need to be uber complex. They got some talented receivers. You can hear about that on the podcast I did earlier today on Locked On Seminoles. That is a tremendous group for BC. It's not an Ohio State group, but they got an experienced guy coming back that was really good as a freshman. Got a 6'5", 225-pound guy transferred in from Tech who has roughly 100 catches over the last 2 seasons. They got a kid coming up the ropes. It's got a chance to be pretty good. And they got one other transfer that had like 30-some catches. They're pretty good. If they can run the ball early, they're going to give Florida State a lot of fits. So I'm curious if they let Thomas get after it. Are they going to do any of those jumbo packages? Who knows? But if Bill O'Brien lets Thomas Castellanos eat, as they say, and do what he does, then it's a little easier for him when he drops back and just does basic drop back passing. They don't want him in 3rd and 8 from the pocket. Not that he can't do it, but that's not where he's best. He had 15 scores last year as a passer, but 14 picks. He needs to settle that down. He needs to get that under 10. And Florida State secondary is probably hungry for some picks after last week. They didn't get many chances. If Bill just lets Thomas throw it around, which I still think would be a mistake compared to the other option, Florida State will probably get at least 1. So that's going to do it for tonight's show on Locked On Seminoles. Going to try to do 2 shows as often as possible. Moving forward, there's so much going on with Florida State football. Thank you very much for stopping in once again. I truly appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. and hopefully things get better this next Monday against Boston College. Please hit that like button, that notification bell, subscribe, rate, and review. Share this podcast and comment on YouTube. Love to hear what you all have to say. If you have a show idea, if there's anything else, I'm more than happy to accommodate. Everybody have a good evening, and I will see you on Wednesday.